Joining us now for our brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi. What are you doing in Abuja? I just want to know. This one that you are now stationed in Abuja.
Dr. Reuben.
Away from the main team.
It's only a temporary thing. You know, I told you I'm spreading myself, of course, between my duties here and being a guide for my big brother and oldest and sister-in-law while they're here. We've got a few diplomatic missions to put together at the Czech embassy later on today. So hopefully I'll be with you all very soon. But good morning to you, Dr. Reuben, and good morning to you, Rufai and Vimba. I hope you're all doing well. Let me tell you what is happening around the world. Well, let's begin with French President Emmanuel Macron, who, alongside his wife Brigitte, have filed a defamation lawsuit against US political commentator Candace Owens because she claims that the French First Lady was born male. Now, let's take a listen to what Candace has had to say.
You were born a man and you will die a man. That's the point I'm making. So give us a sample. I'll send my doctors to take your blood. Figure it out real quick, however you want to go about this. Hey, how about just giving us some pictures again of you growing up, raising your children? That would be fine. For whatever reason, to phone, by the way, like I said, we'll get to the bottom of it, right? That is what Discovery is for. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. You're probably hoping, this will go away and at least we'll say we sued her. We'll say we went after her. She'll probably file for this to get dismissed. I'd like to make it to Discovery. I think that we owe that to the world. Anyways, you guys, we are revolting against this. We're revolting against the perverts that run the world. And I want to be very clear here. I count you among them. I think you're sick. I think you're disgusting. And I am fully prepared to take on this battle on behalf of the entire world. Okay? That's what I'm going to say. On behalf of the entire world, I will see you in court.
Well, just as we've heard there, those are very, very strong words from Candace Owens. So just as we've heard there, Candace Owens has repeated her claims multiple times on her self-titled podcast. Now, earlier this year, she released a series on her podcast called Becoming Brigitte, where she continues this narrative. And back in March of 2024, she did say that she was so certain that Brigitte Macron was born male that she would stake her entire professional reputation behind that belief. Now, this hinges on a conspiracy theory that has circulated on the internet for quite some time, and it alleges that Mrs. Macron was born male under the name of Jean-Michel Froguenot, which is a name actually belonging to her brother. That is her older brother's name. Now, the Macrons who filed this lawsuit in the United States state of Delaware on Wednesday say that they had asked Candace Owens repeatedly for a retraction, but have now decided that referring this matter to a court of law was the only remaining avenue for remedy. So we will continue to stay with that story. To the Middle East now, where essentially the mass starvation in Gaza has essentially prompted 109 international aid organizations to call on governments to take action. Now, Médecins Sans Frontières, otherwise known as Doctors Without Borders, Save the Children, and Oxfam are among the group who released a joint statement that says that their colleagues and the people they serve are wasting away. And that's as Israel's and the Israeli government siege starves the people of Gaza. Aid workers are now joining the same food queues, risking being shot just to feed their families. At least 43 people have died from malnutrition since last Sunday alone. 10 of them died in the last 24 hours. Children are also among the dead. Now, the United Nations says that more than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces while seeking food. That Gazans also are collapsing in the street, and that they've also been admitted to hospitals for severe exhaustion, which is caused by a lack of food. Israel, however, which controls the supply of aid into Gaza, has rejected the claims by the group of organizations and said that this group of organizations are serving the propaganda of Hamas. Now, finally, to the African continent, and let's take a look at Mozambique. Now, Mozambican opposition leader Venancio Mondlane has been charged with inciting terrorism following post-election violence that left hundreds of people dead in the southern African country. Now, Mondlane was indicted on 5 charges, and that's after months of unprecedented protests across Mozambique, which began last October following elections, which actually saw the extension of the ruling Frelimo party. They extended their 5-decade lead on top of Mozambique. Now, the unrest unsettled investors and squeezed the Mozambican government's already tight finances in this gas-rich country. Now, Mondlane, who was officially second to now President Daniel Shapo in the vote, has reached a deal in principle with the government to end the violence in March. That was back in late March. But he says that he will now gather local and international lawyers as he decides on how best to respond. So there's 5 very serious charges against him there. Those are your stories from around the world. Love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
All right, Femi, the deals against Mondlane are very political in nature. What happened? Mozambique had a very flawed elections, which a lot of international rights groups have come out to say there was mass election fraud in that election. And in fact, specifically, they talked about places like Gaza in Mozambique. That was a big Frelimo heartland, where over 800,000 ghost voters were put on the register. And there are many other facts. Frelimo has never responded to it. All Frelimo did was, in cahoot with the judiciary, you see, the problem of judiciary is all over Africa. They quickly gave Chapo the mandate, and Frelimo continued to be there. And this man had been protesting, but now they are bringing terrorism charges against him. Yes, we condemn the violence. It has affected Mozambique. Mozambique is dealing with a lot. If you remember the Cabo Delgado situation, with its insurgency and everything around Mozambique, the killings and all of that, we don't want to go back to those days. I mean, if you remember the checkered history of violence in Mozambique, nobody wants to go back those days. But we want the best to be done for a country. You can have a fair system. There was public condemnation and widespread condemnation against Frelimo, and more in support of Podemos, Mondlane's party, leading up to the elections. And we saw it. And we all know how those elections went. I mean, there are many. What's it called should do is be able to address the concerns and make people even have confidence in the Mozambican system. But Chapo has taken power. And a couple of months ago, they tried reaching an agreement with Mondlane. All of a sudden now you're trying to charge him with terrorism, which he feels is trumped-up charges. Also, this story also talks about the use of social media, because they say he's been using social media out of his hideout in South Africa to be able to talk about this. And just sort of like a replica of what Jair Bolsonaro is also doing with the use of social media. But the difference in this case is that a lot of people have claimed that Mondlane has a legitimate concern that is being raised about these elections, and this should be investigated. As regards what's happening in Gaza, I mean, I've talked constantly, and also as regards what's happening in Gaza, the killings of people. But the sad reality now is that even aid workers, the likes of Médecins Sans Frontières and other people that are working there, are so hungry to be able to feed the hungry people. Israel claimed with its Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that they are doing a good job at feeding people and providing aid in Gaza. Look at how malnourished these videos look. This video is a sad reminder of where the world is. Look at that child, so sick, inundated with disease. They cannot feed. And that's the same people that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation feel they are feeding, because the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation claimed that the United Nations that will have done a better job with feeding these people. They claim that most of the aid is going to Hamas. So they said, let them step in. You can see the good job Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is doing with feeding the Gazan people. You can see how well fed that child is on the video based on what Israel claimed. But what's the flip side of it? Israel claimed, it's a farce. In fact, they say, they are using this as propaganda. Hamas is supporting this. So you can see the children, how well fed that child is. As regards Candace Owens, I just hope she has a lot of proof. You see, because all this conspiracy theory that's being shared online, people need to be careful. I'm not sure Macron's wife is going to be the first wife of a president that people have said is a man. They did the same too to Michelle Obama, if you remember. I'm just sure Michelle Obama didn't take that case up. So I just hope she has proof. We would like to see the court case when it starts, and both sides will provide their own proof. Goodbye.
Right. I think I'll focus on Gaza and how these latest developments are impacting geopolitics and how we see, if I may call them, the pieces on the chessboard continue to move around. Because in the last couple of days, we've seen that Brazil has intensified their attempt to join South Africa in the ICJ genocide case against Israel. So now, why this is of interest to me is because, of course, we know that there's been a more intense fallout between the United States and the BRICS nations. And following that and following the tariff threat and so forth, Brazil's president has become more vehement in ensuring that he fights and stands up against what he feels is the American agenda. So they'll be joining the South Africans in that case that we saw instituted at the beginning of this crisis. But this is of interest to me because in response to this momentum that the genocide case is garnering at the ICJ, the United States has actually instituted a bill that I believe is in its second readings to implement sanctions on South African government officials and certain South African politicians because they're saying that they feel that South Africa is encouraging the world to align with terrorists and communists. And I quote that directly from the bill itself. So this is in progress in the American Congress. And if you look at the reading of the bill, you'll find that they cited just the ICJ genocide case. And they've also cited instances of what they're calling corruption within South Africa. And they're also saying that they will not stand by, that the United States will not stand by while South Africa abandons its policy of being non-aligned and cozies up to Iran, China, and Russia. This is according to the statement from the United States. So in the spirit of geopolitics, yes, you have the crisis firsthand as it happens in Gaza, and then you now see the fallout, the ripple effect globally as we start to see some of these movements being made. I mean, you know, we've already mentioned that South Africa is currently the biggest economy on the African continent. Now, what these sanctions we do, we've seen United States and Western sanctions on countries like Zimbabwe in the past, and what these sanctions do is they destroy an economy. Yes. So it's interesting for me to see how they will react to this, how it will also trickle down to other countries like Nigeria who are aligning with BRICS Plus, who are aligning, with the global south in this crisis, and how far the United States is prepared to go in punishing these countries that they feel are creating too much of a strong opposition to Israel. I'm very curious to see how this will play out.
Okay, because we don't have time, I'll go to the editorial points quickly on all the three issues that you have raised. Now, the Macron suing Candace Owens. Now, she alleges that one, President Macron is an agent of a mind control program by the United States, the CIA. And two, that Mrs. Macron, Bridget, used to be a man, and or is a man, you know, whatever. Three, that both of them are involved in an incestuous relationship. The Macrons have sent 3 notices for retraction, which she rejected. Our position, through our spokesperson, is that, one, she's an American citizen. A French government cannot be dictating freedom of expression, First Amendment regulations in the United States. And on the basis of that, she has repeated the offense by doubling down through another podcast, broadcast called Becoming Bridget. Now the Macrons say they are even ready to come to the United States to testify because they have suffered, according to their lawyers, reputational damage. Now the suit was filed on Tuesday in the state of Delaware by one of the leading law companies, law firms in the United States, reputable company dealing with issues of defamation. Clearlock,
Yes.
that company is called. And so this is the issue here, but it's also a statement about the effect of the social media, what people do with the social media, and also about reputation, about defamation, and the right of persons, even when you are a president, to sue those who try to malign you. In the French system, even the president can sue and be sued. They run an acquisitorial system. The French president does not enjoy any immunity. So those are the basic details in that regard. As for Mozambique, we discussed this same issue last year ahead of the October 9, 2024 election in Mozambique. And we concluded that the Frelimo did not want to leave power, having ruled that country since they gained independence. But Mondlane, leading another party, was the major challenge. He had issues. Even his posters were not allowed to be displayed. Now, during the election, his group was intimidated. They were not allowed to be part of it. At the end of the day, Daniel Chapo, a much younger man, was declared the winner of the election. On October 19, the lawyer to Mondlane was killed in central Maputo. So they started with that issue. And of course, Mondlane started protesting and all of that. There was nationwide protest, if I recall correctly. Now he's being charged. He was invited to the office of the Attorney General of the Federation, the PGR, and he was accused of instigation to terrorism, instigation to crime, instigation to whatever, about 5 charges, to murder and all of that, incitement to disobedience. These were the charges on the list. But he says he does not agree. What is unfortunate about the situation in Mozambique is that in March, both Chapo, who was declared winner, and Mondlane, they tried to meet to, have peace, to reconcile. But Mondlane says almost everything in that agreement meeting has not been respected by the ruling government. And in April, there was even a reconciliation law that was signed after the election. He says even that has not been respected. And that is why he's saying that the charges by the PGR, the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation, are just trumped up charges. And that he is back in the country with a very clear conscience. As for Gaza, well, what else can we say about this? It's very clear that Israel is violating international law. The latest development, as you have pointed out, is that 109 civil society organizations are now speaking up also and saying that this situation is bizarre, is unacceptable. And I think the international community should continue to mount pressure on Israel in terms of the violation of humanitarian law in the Gaza Strip.
Right.
People cannot even have access to food. They cannot have access to aid. The killing count has increased over the weekend from 100 to 111 as of this morning. That should be condemned. It is condemnable.
Exactly.
It is unacceptable. Thank you.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you, Dr. Reuben. Thank you, Vimbai, and thank you, Rufai, for your great submissions to the World Brief. But let's take a look at newspaper headlines. As ever, we begin with This Day. And if we take a look at the front page of This Day, we can see that among the many stories on the front page, This Day does report that Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Abubakar Bagudu, says that it's President Tinubu's ambition to see Nigeria refine all of its crude inside of the country. Bagudu went on to say that though Nigeria had one of the most distorted pricing systems just some 2 years ago, now, due to the reforms undertaken by President Tinubu, they've helped stop these distortions. If we take a look at the inside pages. First, if you take a look at page 9 of this day, we'll also see more on Nigeria's oil positioning. And that's as for the first time, the United States has become a net exporter of crude oil to Nigeria. And that was back in February and March as crude demand on the US East Coast slowed due to refinery maintenance issues, and the Dangote refinery drove up Nigeria's demand essentially for more imports. Now, that's according to the US Energy Information Administration, the EIA. Now, this follows Nigeria's essentially inability to meet its own domestic crude supply demands, obligations to local refiners, especially the Dangote refinery. So it is a development that is threatening both its refining ambitions and economic stability. Now, staying with this day, though, if we stay on the inside pages and now look at to page 8, we'll see that the Federal High Court in Lagos has dismissed the 13-count charge filed against Oba Otudeko, who is a former chairman of First Bank of Nigeria, over this alleged 30 billion naira loan fraud. Now, the 3 other defendants are Stephen Olabisi Onosoyan, and he is a former group managing director of FBN, as well as Soji Akintayo, who is a former board member of Honeywell Flour Mills PLC and Anchorage Limited, a company linked to Otudeko. We did hear Onosoya say that he's been vindicated there. Now, if we move on to the New Telegraph this morning, it does lead with the People's Democratic Party admitting that it has paid dearly for its negligence, that its crisis is self-inflicted, and says it's time to truly reconcile. Now, this is ahead of its NEC meeting today. That being said, 4 PDP senators have defected to the APC, inching the ruling party closer to having its 2/3 majority in the Senate. Just 3 more senators and the APC will have met that mark. Speaking of the APC, it has changed the location of today's NEC meeting to the presidential villa. Now, about that NEC, let's take a look at the Daily Trust. Now, the Daily Trust headline suggests that the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Professor Nentawe Yilwata, will emerge as the national chairman of the APC. That's what the Daily Trust is suspecting. Now, ahead of PDP's NEC meeting, the Leadership newspaper does lead with the PDP losing 17 senators and 22 reps in just 2 years, just to underscore the hemorrhaging happening within the PDP. Let's take a look at The Guardian. The Guardian leads with the 435% spike in tax revenue, which is spurring hope for fiscal recovery and reductions in the deficit. Also on The Guardian, there are reports that port inefficiencies and corruption are kicking up inflation and logistic cuts by 40%. Let's take a look at The Punch. The Punch does lead again with this escalation of the tariff battle as distribution companies known as DISCOs reject any type of review talks with the states. That's as 36 state energy commissioners are due to meet with the federal government as the showdown worsens. Now, it's a situation which is also picked up by Business Day newspaper today, which sheds light on Enugu State's DISCO data audit, which triggered the tariff cuts. Now, that's as other states support and back this 160 naira per kilowatt tariff. My friends, those are your newspapers. Thank you for listening.
Adefemi, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I hope you continue to enjoy your stay in Abuja. We miss you. Hurry back home.